Hopefully everyone can see my screen all right. Good afternoon. My name is Matt Wallace. I am a Senior Solutions Advisor with Posit. I'm joined today by Connor Casey, who's also in the background. He's going to be assisting in some of the chat and answering some questions, anything that you have along the way, but we're happy to assist, and let's get started. So as we kick off today, we're going to try to keep it fairly informal. I've got a pretty good agenda for you. Should be interesting. We've got a lot to discuss in a short period of time, so we're going to move through pretty quickly. So first topic, why should you stay? In short, we're going to show you some pretty interesting things. I think we're going to give you some ideas on how you can revise a little bit of what you do on a day-to-day basis. We're going to walk you through some of the platform that we provide, show you how you can deploy some of that content, and more importantly, show you how some aspects of AI can assist you in that process and might provide a little bit of a different perspective than some of the things that you've seen thus far today. And most importantly, one of the reasons to stay is I only have 6 slides left, and then the rest of it's all presentation part, and we'll get you into the products so that you can see. So as we walk through the platform, a couple things. My agenda today is pretty simple. I'm going to share with you how we help organizations like yours. And I'd really love to know, more about your team when we get into the Q&A, what you're working on, the data science challenges that you're running into, and really what you're focused on this year. So before we dive in, though, a little bit of context about Posit and our perspective and where we come from in this. Posit's the company behind our studio. It's a product used by millions of people right now, along with open source projects like Shiny, Tidyverse, Quarto, etc. And everything we build is accessible to everyone, regardless of economic means, because in data science, being able to reproduce and critique each other's work is essential to real progress. And so what does that really mean for you? And that really means that today, the barrier to entry today for you is zero. You have free access for life to our studio in Positron, with the option to expand to our enterprise platforms down the road. And that's where it's really important to share that we also build professional grade tools on those enterprise platforms, used at more than 10,000 organizations right now. And after more than a decade working with teams across life sciences, banking, government, and beyond, we've seen up close really what makes data science succeed and what gets in the way. And honestly, the biggest challenges usually aren't the models or the analysis, it's the environments that the teams are working in. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Put simply, we're the only open source data science company who has publicly committed to never selling or going public. And in order to ensure that our mission is uncompromised, there are really a lot of companies out in this space. And many of them are chasing the next infusion of venture capital or the next major acquisition or the next IPO. It's never been our goal. It never will be. And furthermore, we reinvest in that public mission every day. So when I tell you that there is free and open source software for you to download, yes, that really means free. So why is that important? When you move into the enterprise platform, we're going to talk about a few things today. And the enterprise pieces, specifically our data science tool chain called Posit Team, addresses all 3 of these areas. Posit Workbench provides a secure and scalable development environment for R and Python users who want to code in R Studio, Jupyter, VS Code, etc. Posit Connect really enables sharing those insights by facilitating quick and easy deployment of many of the open source frameworks, things like Shiny, Dash, Streamlit, Bouquet, Python, R Markdown, Plumber APIs, etc., and so much more. Now, Posit Package Manager is the third piece of that puzzle. It provides the tools you need to host packages inside your firewall and monitor things like system dependencies and license agreements, etc. And I'm going to quickly demonstrate how all of that works for you now, but we're going to just wrap up with 3. Looks like I think I've got 3 last slides here. The first one here is we know your challenges. Our customers face similar challenges to those in your organization regularly. And in dealing with a lot of complex actuarial challenges, which are part of our specialty, I'm going to walk you through some real life examples. And there's one on screen of a comment that we received from some other people in the similar space. And I really want you to get a feel for what you're seeing today. And so we're going to walk through a couple different things. As we move into the demo, I'm going to step off screen so that you have the full picture because I want to show you some product. I'm going to demo some live content, and we're going to walk through some of those things. But as we set the opening scenario for the presentation, imagine this. You're starting out, you're juggling projects, deadlines are tight, and then an email hits. And I'm sure none of you have ever had this, this experience. It's because it seems like it happens every day to everybody that I know. Management wants last year's analysis redone or last month's content redone, same data, new assumptions. They want it fast. And for actuaries and data scientists, that's really just the job. That's part of what we end up having to do. And these requests certainly come from with urgency and not always a lot of extra time. And that's usually what happens in a lot of cases, and that's when the scramble begins. So you dig for old code, you hope the environment still works, you try to remember what assumptions you used, and you cross your fingers that the results are even reproducible in this instance. It's frustrating, and it pulls you away from the real analysis in this case. So what we're here to share with you today is kind of a concept of what could be. So what if that whole cycle disappeared? What if revisiting an analysis was quick and painless, and you open the project, you see what was done, you update the assumptions, you deliver results all within a short time period. And that's really what Posit's modern ecosystem makes possible, which is clarity, reproducibility, and trust. And we're going to go through some of that. Now, for actuaries, that means less time wrestling with that legacy code and more time generating some insights. And in this case, for managers, it means results you can trust and defend. For organizations, it means workflow, build on transparency and efficiency. Posit doesn't just speed things up, it makes the whole flow better. And let's walk through this scenario. I'm going to show you how Posit's platform from Workbench to Positron, and we'll talk a little bit about Databot and Positron Assistant, pieces of the Positron environment. And we'll finish with talking a little bit about Connect and how all of those pieces together transform a simple request into a rapid, traceable deployment cycle. And we'll start where most of us begin in Posit Workbench, what we call the familiar environment that anchors the entire ecosystem together. So let's step out of the demo side, presentation side, and we'll step into demo. So we begin by looking at the Posit team platform that we discussed moments ago, and that's really comprised of Posit Workbench over here for development, Posit Connect for the deployment side, and Posit Package Manager for governance. And all three are centrally hosted in your environment and provide a no download, no plugin web-based environment for your work. We'll start today in Posit Workbench. And as we step in, here we are in Posit Workbench. It's the integrated development environment that's really designed to support reproducible analyses, scalable models, and collaborative workflows. And you'll notice something familiar right away. As we look through the platform, it's a web-based environment. It's an easy place to start. And you'll see and you'll recognize the icon for R, and there's a P for Positron. But as we look into the platform, this is where we see that the integrated development environments for RStudio, VS Code are both there. That's by design. Workbench doesn't replace the tools that you've already used. It brings them together so you can stay in an environment that you're comfortable with while benefiting from a more unified platform. You have accessibility to large platforms utilizing things like Jupyter Notebooks, Jupyter Labs, Snowflake, Databricks, AWS, etc. And it also includes Positron, which we're going to talk about today, which is that next generation IDE. So we talked about getting that email. That email calls us in. We have to look at that old projects. We'll go to our old project files and we'll start in RStudio. And as we open RStudio and review our old project, we see that this sense of continuity is important. It's everything that we have been known to use from an RStudio desktop and infrastructure just sitting in our web-based environment. When you need to revisit work from last year, you don't have to reorient yourself or rebuild your setup. You open Workbench, it feels familiar. So that familiarity in this instance is going to lower the friction that you need to get started, helps you get back into the analysis quickly. So we're going to click on something, and we're going to just pull up that code that we had, and we're going to kind of kickstart the process here. Workbench, though, goes beyond familiar editors. In this instance, it brings that reproducibility that we talked about. It brings collaboration into the workflows itself. Projects are backed by version control, as you saw when I opened up with Git. Dependency management, shared environment, and that really means that your teammates and you can pick up where you left off, and you can trust that everyone's working from a consistent setup. And it eliminates those whole concepts of it works on my machine, but I don't know if it's going to work on yours, et cetera. And it's all in one place. Now, for managers and leads, this provides a level of traceability and consistency that's often hard to achieve. When you're working with a project in an online version of RStudio, it's a practical way to support governance and transparency without adding a lot of extra steps into the team's workflow. And in this case, we're starting out with an application here that's that risk application we talked about. It has a lot of formatting, it has a lot of content in play, and we're going to walk through some modifications to the platform. This is giving us some individual assessments. We look at a broad base of different factors as part of the risk analysis. And then as we adjust those, we're able to calculate risk scores and deal with the platform accordingly. But altogether, the idea is pretty simple. RStudio on Workbench lets you keep using the tools you already rely on, but it's in a more integrated, reproducible setup, and it's really the base layer for everything else in the Posit ecosystem. So with that foundation in place, let's talk about some of the things that you came here to see today, and we'll take the next step in Positron, and that's really the evolution of the integrated development environment that we were talking about here, the IDEs. And that's where, in our opinion, intelligence and governance come together as part of everyday productivity. Now, as we go, I'll be attempting to monitor the chat simultaneously. So if you have questions, this is not a scripted formal presentation. You're free to interrupt me along the way, and I will do my best to answer your questions as we go. I am going to just pop in and stop this application from running real quick as we step back out, and we'll move over into the next session on Positron. When we jump into Positron, we've opened the project initially in RStudio, and now this is Posit's next generation IDE, as I mentioned. It really brings together that familiar coding environment that we have looked at in the past with an intelligent assistant and governance-aware workflows that will bring in additional capabilities along the way. You can kind of think of it as the next evolution of RStudio, but built for modern actuarial work where, as we talked about at the beginning, speed, reproducibility, and compliance are really part of the everyday reality. And in these instances here, if you open this up, what you're looking at is you're looking at a fork of VS Code. This is something that was intentionally built on top of VS Code, but it's designed to handle a couple different things. One, in a traditional environment, you of course have the Python, but you also have up here R, and you can start up multiple interpreter sessions and multiple versions of R and Python installed on the same platform. Gives you the flexibility of working with VS Code and R both in the same environment along with other languages, so it's adaptable to your needs. You don't have to keep leaving different interfaces. You can work all together in the same one. So it gives you that familiar four-panel format as you have seen traditionally in RStudio, where you're working with R. You've got your run space down here and things like your variables and plots over here on the right. As we kick things off and we have our code that's open here, this is similar to what we just looked at in RStudio, and I'll kick off the code just so that we can see it running in the background. And as we do, you'll notice that even though it's a year old, the code still is running as we would expect it to be, and it kicks off and it runs our application over here on the right-hand side, just as we had done in RStudio. And that's because Positron keeps those environments consistent and the dependencies are managed, and you're not spending time troubleshooting. You get results right away, just as you would in RStudio. And the important part is For us, even though there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of extensibility with integration with Git, and you've got the extension marketplace that allows you to take the platform that you have here and extend it beyond what you would traditionally use. You also have some additional things that are built into the platform as well that take us beyond what we might use today, and for the purposes of our presentation, what brought us all together. Positron in our mind is more of an ecosystem, and you get faster iteration cycles, you get built-in documentation support and compliance awareness woven into the workflow. And for actuaries, that means you can stay focused on the math, the modeling, and the risk assessment, while Positron takes care of the underlying infrastructure around the governance and reproducibility. So in this case over here, we've got the analysis that existed last year. It ran, it produced results, but now we need to revisit it with some updated assumptions, and this is where Positron really helps. It gives us the tools to revisit, refactor, and enhance the work without starting over. And really, instead of worrying about whether or not the environment still works, we can stay focused on the business problem because we know it's going to, and each session that we have here is its own development environment. So we've rerun the legacy code and we've confirmed that everything still works. So next, let's bring in a concept called Databot. And Databot is Posit's AI-powered analyst to help us take a fresh look at the data set and understand what's changed since last year. So as we step out of that application, we stop that application running. We're running a data set over here on the left-hand side. There's a couple files here, and this could easily be a data source connection that you have into the database, or you could be using flat files in the form of CSV, Parquet, JSON files, whatever the choice may be. Now, because of time and assumptions have shifted, new data could be added, and management may want to know what's changed. And instead of digging through the open data set line by line, we can lean on something called Databot to speed up that discovery process. So what really is Databot? Databot is Posit's AI-powered analyst that works with you to profile your data set. It helps you highlight patterns, anomalies, and shifts in the data, and it speeds up the early exploratory work so you can really focus on interpretation, modeling, and the decisions that follow. Now, if you're like me when you first stepped into this, or you've looked at other presentations today talking about AI, I'm sure you've got a lot of thoughts running through your head. You may have even heard prior to this that AI is inaccurate. It's potentially a little intimidating. It takes a ton of expertise. And sometimes it just makes things up. And honestly, yeah, it does. You're right, if you use it the wrong way. But today I want to show you why we're different, why our approach actually works in the real world. And the key idea here is on this, when we're looking at Databot, we're asking questions. We're not looking for AI to spit out an answer. We're using it to help us write code that derives the answer. And when you shift the role of AI from answer machine to analysis partner, it changes everything. The accuracy goes up, the transparency goes up, and suddenly these tools become genuinely helpful and useful because you turn days of work into hours or less. So what we've done here is we've loaded up Databot. Databot is going to provide some prompts out here for you. These are just simply things that as you click on for you, that prompts you just to give you an idea of where to begin and where to start. If I click it, it's just transferring text down here for me to start with. And in this case, I'm going to ask it to just say, I'm going to freehand it and say, load and explore the data sets from my /data directory. And when I do that, it's going to kick off and begin that process. First thing it's going to do is it's going to locate the data, make sure that it has that information that I've asked about. And as it does so, it's going to also prompt me and ask me, do you want me to do this? Because as I indicated a couple minutes ago, what it's doing is we're asking it to run code against the data. And we're asking it to generate code to derive an answer, not necessarily spit out the answer being 42 or whatever the case may be. So in doing so, I'm going to say yes. I want it to go ahead and do that. And as it goes through this process, you'll see that it's being transparent about what it's doing, and it's spitting out the code that it's running. So if you object at any point in time along the way, you can readjust the code, you can rerun the code, and you have transparency to what's being done and how those answers have derived, taking away that ambiguity and that hallucination that you might traditionally see. And as we scroll down, we can see quickly how Databot surfaces the shape of the data, and we immediately see where values are missing and where content is being profiled, distributions have shifted. And this is the kind of exploratory work that you're usually writing code by hand, and it's usually takes hours or even days in some instances, but this is where it starts to become automated and reproducible. And when it's done and it's completed the task that I've asked it to do, it says, hey, I've loaded and explored all three data sets, and here's what I found. And it gives me a summary synopsis at the end of the content. And it does this every time I've asked it to do something with additional suggestions on how it could move forward. Databot is both writing the code to take action and making it reusable by giving it to you, and it's also giving you the summarized results. And in my opinion, it's like having a little bit of a, excuse me, having a bit of a junior analyst with you who's never sleeping and is able to help you kind of flag issues before they turn into problems. And for actuaries, that really means less time on the exploratory grunt work and more time on the interpretation, the modeling, and the decision making. And it's not there to replace your expertise by any means. It's there to amplify it and give you the tools that you need to do so. So as you look through and you say you're looking at the data and it says claims amount, for instance, range widely from $100 to $20,000 plus, and you look at it and you might have found some patterns in the data. And it's not just relegated to telling you what are the columns, what are the fields, and what's the data type. You can ask it bigger questions, and I can ask things like investigate the $100 claim pattern. If I can spell here, are these processing fees, deductibles, or data artifacts? And as I ask these questions, again, it's going to start generating the code to analyze these things, and it's going to help you traverse this. Databot's going to help us look at the data with fresh eyes, and instead of guessing at what's changed, we can see it directly. New patterns, new claims, updated distributions, and we can even ask it to flag outliers for review, and that gives us clarity and confidence going forward. And so with Databot's insights in hand, as it finishes this out, at any time when we're asked to do those things, we receive that email, we're asked to make a change, I can utilize this to help derive those insights, get to a pattern, and then put us in a position where we're ready to take the next step, reviewing and refactoring the legacy code. And this is where Positron Assistant comes in, helping us document, enhance, and modernize the analysis so it's not just functional, but future-proof. Databot, to round out, specifically focused on the analysis and information of the data files and what I'm looking at up front. So I'm exploring my tables in the database, I'm exploring my flat files, etc. We still have our application code over here. It still needs to have changes made. And as we look at this in Positron Assistant, we have a Positron Assistant is here to assist us in the process. So what can it do and how does it work? You'll note on the code, I have a fairly significant piece of code. There's not a lot of commentary of any kind in the code. It ends up, I think, being here about 700 and some lines. There we are. We don't really know what it does necessarily out of the gate. And because we've run last year's analysis, we've pulled some fresh insights in Databot, we kind of hit a familiar spot, legacy code without documentation. And it might run. It's often hard to interpret. And for actuaries and data scientists, that's a problem because transparency, again, and reproducibility are essential. And if you can't explain what the code's doing, it's really tough to trust the results, and stakeholders are going to feel the same way. So let's understand and begin by trying to figure out what the code's actually doing. This is where Positron Assistant comes into play. Now you'll note down here, I can add context for the questions that I'm asking, but because the app is open over here and this tab is available, it already knows that I'm accessing the app.r as my current file. When I add the question, explain what this application is actually doing, And if there is anything important that I need to be aware of, I can hit enter. At this point, Positron Assistant is going to begin working, and it's going to sift through the code, and it's going to tell me what it's doing. It says, okay, summarized up front, it's dashboard key features. There are individual tabs. We know what each tab does. And as I look through, there are important things to be aware of. I'm using AWS Bedrock as the foundational piece because Positron Assistant is not introducing AI into your organization. What we are doing is utilizing your existing AI infrastructure. So if you have something like AWS Bedrock, Anthropic, Gemini, GitHub Copilot, et cetera, within your organization, and you have security rules that are already in place, we're going to utilize those. And so as we go through, you can watch how the assistant is breaking down the application section by section and summarizing what each part of the code is doing. And that opaque script on the right suddenly becomes a little bit more readable, not just for me, but understandable for anybody who wants to revisit it later. And what used to feel like a black box is now explained a lot more clearly. It's transparent. And so the logic behind the analysis is easier to understand. And in my opinion, it's not simply relegated to the sidelines, but offers you the insight and the ability to interact directly with the code itself, to ask direct questions about the content in the code. What I mean by that is I'm looking at the code itself. I've asked things over here on the side. And when I get to specific sections and they say, gosh, I just don't understand what they necessarily did, I can come down here and I can interactively highlight different sections, and I can grab this whole area and I can type in something else and say, can you tell me what the highlighted section does specifically? And as I do that, it's not just looking at the overall section of code, but it's also going through the specific highlights and telling me what each piece and part does. I can use this to drive commentary back into the code. I can use it to understand what's being done in the specific areas. And it helps me understand specifics about it, from this layout structure to the main contents and some of the interactive features and data processing parts of it along the way. This goes, in my opinion, well beyond documentation because it's collaboration on this content. And as I'm running this code, you'll see different things in place. We'll bring up this interactive application on the right, and you'll recall as part of this scenario, we were put in a situation where we had to go back and we were asked to make a change of some kind to the data, to the application, to something along the way in order to make it available for the future. So in this instance, I'm going to do one last thing down here. I'm going to be asked the question, somebody said, hey, I don't like the risk category being a drop-down. I want it to be something else. So I say, how would I change the risk category drop down on the first page from to radio buttons? We'll do it that way. And I'll simply hit enter. And at this point in time, it's doing a couple things. It starts to go through and refactor the code, and it becomes collaborative instead of tedious, where I would have spent hours deciphering some of the old scripts, trying to find the spot in the code. It's able to go through for me and answer those specific questions. It's made those changes that I have asked it to make in a very maintainable, documented format, because remember, I'm still using Git for version control. I'm doing this interactively. And what might have taken hours previously speeds up the entire workflow, reduces risk, and frees me up for time for higher value analysis. And all the while, I'm still able to preserve some of this institutional knowledge that might have been here from somebody who was 4 years ago, 6 years ago. I don't have to throw an application away. I can reuse that. And that change that I asked it to make, it has highlighted what it's going to do. It's asked me whether I want to keep it or undo it. And it's gone ahead and made those changes in the application itself. This is where something like Positron Assistant over here turns undocumented legacy code into really clear maintainable, transparent assets. And what I consider something that might have been legacy content that would be a black box, it turns it into a glass box where you can see immediately what's being done. And with that in place, it's this part of the presentation. We're in a good spot to push this content back out to the masses and update a live app with Posit Connect. And then we'll show how that meets some of the stakeholder delivery. So if we've completed our changes here, we've looked at the change that's made, we've updated the contents, we've understood what's been done, we've refactored some of the data, we potentially know where everything is. It puts us in a good situation to hit save at this point in time. We are going to keep our analysis that's here. We've locked in and we're ready to push that out. Now note as I go, any of the changes that I'm making along the way, I can commit those to my source control. I have full control over that. And then I'm ready to push that content out. Now, pushing that content out means something here. And in this case, we've updated our analysis, we've understood what's being done, and now it's time to deliver it back to the executive team. And stakeholders in this case don't want to dig through code. They want something that's accessible, interactive, something that they can explore and trust. And that's where Posit Connect comes in. And that's the next piece of the puzzle that we talked about as part of the Posit team platform. And that in and of itself is really the publishing hub that turns the technical work into stakeholder-ready apps, dashboards, reports, etc. So if I click this button down here called Deploy, it's going to bring up this space and it's going to allow me to see what has been selected for deployment, and it's going to allow me to deploy my project. And if I do so, all I have to do is one click here, deploy my project. You'll see a couple things happening. And regardless of where you work, your deployment's unified. That one click, the updated app goes live into Connect. No manual packaging, no server setup, no command line pushes, etc. The app shows up instantly and ready to share. And if I open this publishing log, you're going to see a couple things. It's creating a bundle, and that bundle has that application code. It has the versions of R and Python that you're using. It has the versions of the packages that you're using. And behind the scenes together, Posit Package Manager is helping keep things reproducible. That's the third piece of the puzzle that we were talking about up front. It's a curated internal source of packages that stays in your environment, that is scanned for malware, scanned for viruses, and ensures that everyone on the team is installing the same versions of content from the same place, which removes a huge amount of variability. Dependencies are locked, environments stay consistent, and every run starts to become traceable. And you'll see it's going through, it's validating the content and validating the records that are there. This gives you, your team, your managers, and others confidence, and as well as any auditors, I suppose, in these cases, it lets your teams reproduce work months or years later. And it's the governance that's built into the workflow. It's not bolted on afterwards, so it's all here. Deployment with Connect is fast, traceable, and auditable. That one click updates your app, and it closes the loop between analysis and delivery, making sure insights are actually able to reach the people who need them. So let's go to that next step. Now we'll look at how to share and engage with stakeholders directly inside of Connect. So in this case, the delivery isn't just functional, but it'll be smooth and interactive. So right down here, it shows us this final link. It tells us where it's been deployed. We can click that link and drive into Posit Connect. We've deployed and updated the app in Posit Connect, but the deployment in this case is really only part of the story. The real impact comes when we start to share it with stakeholders in a way that's clear, and governed, and easy to use. In this case, you'll see that change that we made just a few minutes ago to the application with the radio buttons. It's fully interactive here, just as we would expect it to be. It's published that out automatically, and it gives us a couple different things. It allows us to push something out that's usable, that's trustworthy, and it's aligned with what the audience needs. And so we can do a couple things. Because we are publishers, because we've pushed this content out, we have a publisher's bar over here on the right-hand side under settings. The other thing that we also have is we have previous versions of that content that have been published out. And you can see as I was practicing some of this content For a live demo earlier today, you'll see previous versions that I published out as I was making changes in preparation. And this allows us to download previous code or activate previous versions if there's something that is wrong or we need to roll back, because that's built into the application itself. But let's dig into this a little bit further. There's a couple things in play here. One, we have the application, but because we're going to deploy this out, it's important that we include a couple different things. The first thing here is some metadata. Metadata builds trust, makes the app easier to find. It tells people what they're looking for and why it matters and how to use it. So we'll just add in a full stack actuarial conference demo, and then we'll grab a quick logo and drop that in from off screen down here into the thumbnail. Save that off here. The second thing that we want to do as part of this process is we want to make sure that we understand access controls. It helps us and lets us share confidently. We choose exactly who can see the content, whether it's a team, client, a group, a whole, part of the entire organization. And in this case, it allows us to keep sensitive work protected while still getting it to the right people. But for purposes of this discussion today, I want to make sure that it's accessible to a larger audience. So in this case, I want to push it to the outside world. I also want to come down here and draw attention to something else. Each piece of content has a unique URL with a unique identifier. And custom URLs are something that we can provide to make things easier. Instead of sending a long, messy link that you might have down here, you can share something that's clean and memorable, and it closes the loop and makes the app easy to reference later. So in this case, let's take something and call it public, as we're going through public and risk metrics. And as I add that in, let's see here, I think we've got the slash. We'll have everything in place. Now we save this off. And now we have something that is custom, a custom URL. And so what we'll do is we can test this out. And my colleague, I sent it to my colleague, Connor. He's going to test it and post it for you in the chat as we move along the way. This is something that should be accessible to you in the outside world as we move through. And as we move into other pieces down the road, we'll talk a little bit about some of the runtime and scheduling components as part of this process. But for now, let's wrap up with one last thing as we make this accessible to our larger audience. The last piece is something that we skimmed over in the beginning of the conversation, and there's this tab Query Chat. Query Chat adds a layer of dynamic insight. And this is something that we built into the application using packages that are part of the Posit environment. And one of those packages is an Elmer package, which is part of our free and open source commitment to the outside world and something that you can use yourself. Query Chat helps stakeholders take static results and turn them into something that they can ask questions in plain language and really get data-driven answers. Turns the app from what is a standard report or a dashboard into a conversation. So when we click on something like this, this is where you can drive and enter in interactive content, or you can take one of the many suggestions that I've provided up front, where you can start to query things that might not have traditionally been on one of the dashboards or on one of the assessments or anything of that nature on any of the other tabs. You can utilize this interactively, and you can take this to the next level and derive questions out of the data that weren't thought of when the initial dashboard was created, extending it even further. So in just a few minutes, we've really gone from the request to stakeholder delivery with governance and reproducibility. And that's really the strength of the Posit ecosystem. It helps deliver not just analysis, but some of that confidence and transparency that we talked about. So one of the last things that I wanted to highlight here in my time is to come back here to the content and kind of take you through a little bit of the bigger picture. And one of the things that we talked about initially up front is Posit Connect has tremendous value, not just with working with deploying our content, but Quarto content, Shiny applications, Python, Jupyter Notebooks, Streamlit, Plumber apps, R Markdown, etc. a whole range of content that's available to us. And one of the things that is we're looking at the content that we published out here in this application, we noted something else. We've published the interactive app to Posit Connect so that stakeholders can explore it. We've added some metadata and we've added an graphic so they can find it a little bit easier. They can ask questions with query chat and they can see the results in real time. But in many actuarial workflows, people also need a formal report, something that they can archive, something that they can circulate, or something that they can reference offline. And that's where this Quarto document comes into play. This lets us generate a polished PDF, Word, or HTML type document directly from the same code and the same data behind the application. No copy and paste, no manual rework, just the same analysis presented as a clear narrative. And Quarto is yet another thing that is made part of our free and open source applications that's available to you to use today. This Quarto document summarizes the risk assessment that we just went through, that risk application. As we walk through some of the content, it shows us tables and charts pulled straight from the analysis, and we can walk down the content. It's giving us narrative text explaining the assumptions and methodologies as part of this platform. And furthermore, we can set it up to have automatic updates wherever the data or code changes. So as we start digging into the bigger picture, the report always stays in sync with the app. And we can schedule refreshes and schedule content accordingly. And just like the other application that we have this link that's over here. And as you'll see, Aaron Smith and Connor Casey had posted the link in the app so that you could see the application that I had worked on just moments ago. I'm going to do the same thing into the chat with this one, and we're going to drop in that comprehensive risk Quarto document here. Quarto is meant to really bridge the gaps between interactive exploration and formal documentation. And in this case, your stakeholders will get both. A dynamic app for discovery, a reproducible report for governance, and that combination, as I said, builds that confidence that managers know the numbers are consistent, that auditors can trace the process, and that together the teams will stay aligned on what they're looking at. So in other words, Posit's not just here to deliver insights quickly. We're trying to really make sure that this content is documented, reproducible, and stakeholder ready. And that brings us full circle from request to analysis to deployment to reporting. The last thing that we talked about as part of this piece, and I just want to show you real quick in the background, is Posit Package Manager. And I would be remiss if I didn't spend 2 seconds and focus on that and just let you know what it brings to the table. And as we talk about Posit Package Manager, we talked about this as the quiet workhorse behind the scenes. This is what's helping you utilize those packages internally, understand the dependencies, understand where the content is being pulled from, and often will make your life easier by serving up binary files that are pre-compiled, as well as previous versions of packages made available to you inside of your environment in a secure and scanned fashion. And I say scanned for vulnerabilities, scanned for malware, etc. And so this makes it quite easy to use, and it makes your deployments quite fluid, both from Workbench perspective and into the Connect perspective. So as we wrap up, we'll take a quick step back. And from the moment the request came in, we've moved through the whole actuarial workflow together. We've revisited legacy code. We've analyzed with Databot. We've summarized with Positron Assistant. We've deployed with Connect, and we've shared it out to our stakeholders here. And I think, in my opinion, at each stage, this was faster and clearer and more reproducible than the old scramble and patch approach. And in some respects, what used to feel chaotic becomes a lot more structured and a more traceable cycle that delivers confidence, in my opinion, as well as speed. And for actuaries, that means confidence in the numbers. It means alignment between technical teams and business stakeholders, and it means that you're all working from the same truth. So we're not here to just speed things up. We're here on a mission to provide free and open source tools, provide enterprise tools to help you raise the bar and continue to push that trustworthiness and transparency across the actual actuarial life cycle. So I'm happy to dive into other features. I'm happy to share more content, but I'm also happy to open up for Q&A and answer any questions that anyone might have in our few remaining minutes here. That was a lot in a short period of time. So, oh, hello?
Not a question for you, Matt, but I was just curious if anybody in the room has ever heard of Positron or if today was the first time that we've seen this.
Familiar with our studio, was not familiar with Positron until I started talking to Posit people. So
Nice.
I'm going to throw my email in the chat. If anybody wants to follow up, we are offering free workshops for organizations to start to leverage Positron like Michael's done. So if anybody's interested, feel free to shoot me an email and we can start to figure out how we can upskill your teams.
Well, if there are no questions, I certainly appreciate everybody attending today. If you do have follow-on questions or you get out of the session and you think of something right after you leave, by all means, please email Connor, email the team. Those links that you saw and that we posted in the chat that are running the applications that you just saw on screen will remain up. Let us know. It's a pleasure to meet everybody. Pleasure to talk with everybody.